Hey there, I've been getting a few requests to do a Dynamesh sort of guide from the popularity of one of my videos that I did a while back. Um, this is just going to show you how I use it particularly and the techniques or the applications of it and when it comes in handy especially. So if you were to do this like in my video, Dynamesh time-lapse or whatever it's called, I don't even remember. But if you were to do this with a normal polysphere, obviously you'd get a lot of nasty type of stretching and really bad geometry just from trying to do different things, trying to rework it into what you want it to look like. So in order to make it have, well, allow it to have better geometry, more distributed evenly, and things like that. There's this feature called Dynamesh, which is new to ZBrush 4 revision 2, I think. I have revision 3 right now, but I'm going to show you how to use these. This grouping of buttons is what you want to focus on for this sort of thing. So Dynamesh, by turning that on, you turn the mesh into sort of an automatic like reworking of the geometry. It only happens, it doesn't happen every time you sculpt, so if you want to work correctly you have to hold control, drag outside, sort of like a mask if you want to unmask everything. But just do that and it'll rework the entire mesh in order to, well, according to these settings right here. So after you've turned it on, there's a couple different things that you can focus on. One being the resolution. This is just basically what it is, resolution. If you turn it up, it's going to take a little bit longer, you see, and it's going to be much, much more dense. Then there is group, which is kind of neat. I think it's really nice for hard surface type of things. In order to use it, you're going to need to have predefined groups or use slice curve, which is under brushes, and then slice curve right there. How you use this is Control Shift and then drag, and it's going to make a new group along the line that you draw on. So turn on Dynamesh, and there you go. You get this nice little cut right here, and it's really brilliant. You don't want to use it for things that have like sharp angles like this. Well, not at least in that technique that I just did, because it's going to look like really kind of weird and like curved, and it's not going to be exactly what you want. So in order to combat that, you're going to need to do two cuts. Wait, didn't turn on groups, two cuts. But first, instead of doing the two cuts, you want to do one cut first. So you get that edge, and then do another cut, and do it again, and you get this nice edge right here, and you get lots of nice shapes. But if you want this sort of like sharp angle that I demonstrated before, you're going to have to use let's see, group visible. You want to group the part that you want to be a piece and then redo it, and you have this nice little piece right here. And that's how you get that sort of defined edge instead of doing it in one stroke. It seems sort of monotonous and kind of difficult, but it's a lot easier to do than trying to do like a Boolean operation or something like that. Next is the polish, which is, if you know what the like H-polish brushes are, it sort of does that. If you have really defined faces where it's like a sharp edge or something like that, normally Dynamesh is just going to distribute the polys evenly throughout the entire mesh. So normally what this would look like is just like that, and you see that there's no difference along that edge. But when you turn polish on, you turn Dynamesh on, you'll see that it pinches it sort of in that area, so that has a little more refinement and looks a little bit better. So that's what polish is. It's good for hard surface type of stuff. Project is, it just gives it a little bit more accuracy. So what it does is, after it dynameshes, it projects it back onto the mesh, so it'll get all this faceting from the original low resolution mesh because the Dynamesh is higher resolution. Blur is just like how much you want it blurred. I usually just turn it off because usually it, like if you're doing hard surface especially, it'll get rid of a lot of the detail that you had in there, and if you're doing just normal sculpting, it's going to smooth over certain parts. Like if I were to use a clay brush and maybe pinch it in or get something that looks like a detail or something. It's kind of hard to demonstrate on a lower poly mesh, but you see it smooths it all out and you lack the detail, whereas if you turn blur off, it's going to keep all of the detail there. That's about it for the settings. Resolution wise, I usually keep it at around 300 or so, even though like right now it's not the best because it's a low resolution mesh, but I'm going to try and demonstrate what I would do with a character model if I was starting it out with just a polysphere. Usually what I do is form the basic sort of chest area, torso with the sphere, and then once I have the chest area, then you add the head and like arms, limbs, things like that. And I keep grid on just at this stage because I want to like have it stood correctly, like having the feet right, or just having it in the right orientation if I want to export it and not have to rotate it back correctly later. But you'll see I'm getting a lot of stretching right in that area. If I want to add more detail there, I just turn on Dynamesh, and then you can just sculpt really fine detail, whereas before it's just nasty and low poly. I'm not going to turn on Dynamesh just yet though, because I want to leave it a little bit more undefined. Don't want to do like details just yet. But I had a little bit of a idea of what I want to sculpt out beforehand. It's going to be sort of a lanky like either alien type of creature or robots sort of thing, like a semi-organic robot. Now the tricky part, you might be asking, like, how do I do the limits if like you have, normally if you didn't have anything, you'd just be like dragging out like this and it'd look all weird and stuff. I like to use either insert cube or insert cylinder for the limbs, and what it does is it'll insert a primitive. Well, you can actually make these brushes to insert any type of detail that you want, but it'll insert it, then mask it off so you can modify it all you want. And this is really nice for just sort of blocking out the different limbs and things. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to orient them the right way, like in a pose, because they are primitives and they aren't organic, like they aren't modified with a sculpting tool yet. So just sort of get them in place, I guess, and then like move them around a little bit. A brush that comes in handy for this is Inflate, if you want to add some more volume to work with. But for this, in this case, I want it to be a little bit more skinny for this particular character. And It also allows you to give a little bit more of a segmented type of feel to your character uh, once you Dynamesh and everything. So I'm pretty comfortable with the form so far, so I'm going to turn on Dynamesh. And oh wait, you have to cancel out the mask before you Dynamesh, by the way. And you'll see that it has a little bit of faceting. Just go over that with a smooth brush, and it'll get rid of any of that. I think I might want to lower the resolution a little bit. Yeah, that's a good resolution. Insert cylinder for the lower arm. It can act a little bit weird. It depends on what the normal is of the face. You see the circle is sort of curving back, like it's going to insert it in that direction. So you want to avoid that sort of thing. So you want to be as close to the face of the camera. Well, just mess around with until you get the correct orientation. But you'll notice how this works is you drag it out, which determines the size of it, and then that's whenever you drag back in, it'll determine how thin it is. I think that's just how all the insert brushes work. There might be some sort of setting that you can mess with in order to get it to do a different thing. But instead of using rotate for this, I'm going to use move just because it's less of a headache to rotate it in the, yeah, you get my point. But since this is going to be a more lanky character, I'm going to make the arms sort of long so it can maybe hold a sniper rifle or some sort of longer silence device. Usually whenever you have a suppressor, it greatly elongates the weapon that you're using. So to perceive that, it's going to need, well, in order for it to hold it and keep it stable, it's going to need longer limbs, except they're going to need to be a little bit stronger. So maybe to signify that, you'd put in a metallic sort of material so that it looks a little bit more sturdy, or have it more rigid looking instead of organic. So that's probably what I'll do with the arms, but the torso and the shoulder areas I'll probably keep organic looking so it looks more muscular. Next, I'm going to go for the legs, I think. Spine looks a little bit weird. I think I might put the butt back a little bit, make it have a little bit more of a wanted a really defined rib cage area, I guess, and a very low crotch and high hips, I guess. That's usually one of my habits, is to have really high, really crazy looking hips on my models, sort of they have this sort of cylindrical plane that the legs sort of sprout off of. I think it looks kind of dynamic, but I don't know. So here's the legs. This is going to be a little bit difficult because all the faces are facing this way. So what I could do is try and get it on one of the more downward facing faces. Let's see if I can move this over. Yeah. Oh, dang it. See, that's what happens when you draw them too close, is that they merge together, and yeah. I think I can rotate them back. Maybe. That's why I don't like the rotation tool. Is kind of weird in ZBrush. It depends on the rotation point, which is that, and then if you want to rotate along its axis, it just kind of you have to get that line exactly down the axis of the object in order to have it rotate correctly. But anyways, I'm gonna try and get these. It doesn't really matter as much if you if it's really thin like this. You can just adjust it with the inflate brush, or the scale. We can try that. But of course, scale is all funky whenever you do it with mirror turned on. Do an inflate. which is much more controlled than a scale, which is sort of linear and things like that. So I wanted really chunky thighs to go along with the kind of blobby torso, but I wanted really long, slender lower legs, calf muscles and stuff like that. Just to signify like being able to step through debris or like silently through something instead of having really big lumbering feet that make a lot of noise whenever you step on things. So I'm kind of mimicking human anatomy. I think it's the most interesting. You get a lot of neat spin-offs from human anatomy by mimicking it, so that's what I usually go off of whenever I'm trying to do this sort of thing. Then ZBrush can get a little bit tricky whenever you have thinner objects like this arm and stuff, because it'll like draw through, whenever you're doing the brush, it'll draw through the mesh, and you can like sort of counteract that using backface masking, but it doesn't always work very well, especially if you have a larger brush size than like the thing you're drawing on. Like if I were to try to sculpt clay on this, it's going to do this sort of thing, and that's not what you want. Even though I'm doing it outwards, it's going to make it flattened, whereas if you have auto masking and then backface mask, you can sort of counteract that, but still it acts a little bit weird, and you can get these sort of things going on. So I think I might add in one more cylinder for the lower legs. Not sure what the proportions should be on this guy. Maybe or insert cylinder. There you go. Try and get it facing the correct direction this time. Good enough. Wish they could do a little bit more with the transpose tool. It's kind of clumsy at the moment, just by my personal opinion, but though that's coming from somebody that does a lot of like exact things with normal 3D applications. Not sure. There are two types of legs that you can do. You can do sort of like a chicken leg, where it like bends forward, back, and then forward again, or you can do a human leg that just goes kind of like curves down, then curves back a little bit, then drops down. Well, more accurately, the chicken legs are more like dragon legs, I think of them, but who knows what dragon's anatomy is, right? Inflate this a little bit. Now, trying to see what I can do with these legs, make them look a little bit more dynamic. Usually most of this is just instincts as to how you've done it before and practice. Like, you can't just pick up ZBrush and do this like straight off the bat. You have to really look at different models that have been made and the techniques that they used. But it's really awkward. But yeah. Anyways, kind of wanted to make this neck less muscular. I want it to be really lanky, so you can like have the. I'm gonna make it even longer. So it can like reach behind corners, kind of look around for enemy positions, sort of like a or that thing that kids use that have like the why is X had symmetry off for a second there. Anyways, like the little like submarine telescope things that kids used to use that you can just sort of look around corners and things with sort of that same concept. You really want to keep in mind the functionality or what the character is going to be doing in order for them to have the correct look, or because that speaks, like, even from like a little like a silhouette. Let me turn this down. You can tell that it's some sort of alien, some sort of like really lanky, creepy type of thing, even from not knowing the details underneath it. And that's what you want to go for whenever you're doing a model, is have really recognizable shapes behind what you've made. Like having, like, you want to look at a lot of objects and see what specific shapes are related to specific functions. Like the shoulder area, you can just tell from having a sort of wrapping, rounded, bulbous sort of shape right here that that's a shoulder joint or shoulder muscle or something. And then by having different things like intertwining with that, with the arm and things, you can say, oh, there's arm muscle, or like some sort of arm mechanism. It's just, most of artwork is just observing other things and getting to know like what things look like and what makes them look the way they do. Like cartoonists I have a lot of respect for, because they know exactly what catches the eye and what people are looking for when they see objects, and in that way they're able to take advantage of that and make it so that they don't have to expend much effort into making really simplistic drawings for animations or things like that. But when it comes to 3D models, you want to have just boatloads of detail as much as you can, just so that, I mean, it looks cool, you know. This looks moderately nice right now, but once you have all the details in there, they can be like, oh my gosh, this is such a complex character. It's like watching a movie and having a actor and just have like really neat backstory and explaining everything, but you can tell all of that by just having lots and lots of details on a character. It's really neat. So kind of want to make a little bit more room by the navel, just that it looks a little more skinny, like third world country I mean esque, that sort of type of thing, even though that kind of has a negative connotation, but that's what you're going for with this sort of lanky figure that has the very devious purpose in mind, as like a special operations unit or like a sniper infiltration type of thing. It's always important to have reference on while you're doing your artwork. Like right now I have reference on a second monitor just going off of for this sort of thing. Lots of it is experimenting with shape. Like, I'm not having to actively think much about what I'm doing right now because I've done it several times before, doing different characters, knowing the different landmarks you're supposed to go for with the within models. But yeah, hopefully I'm not rambling, and hopefully I'm not sure if I'm gonna go too far with this, just as a demonstration. I might put up the file just if you guys want to mess with it, but like I'll try to get out the basic shape and silhouette here. I think I might work on this lower arm. Now for the hands, they can get kind of tricky. I like to put them in last because Dynamesh, the way it works, if you were to insert them right now using the insert hand brush, if you were to do this right now and try to Dynamesh it, it's going to look really, really weird because the fingers are so close together that Dynamesh reads that as like, if you don't have enough detail within the resolution, then it's going to look really, really odd, like you're going to get all this weirdness right there. So I like to wait until fine details to insert the hands, and sometimes I even do the hands separately so that I don't have to worry about having like bad topology to work with whenever I'm sculpting in details. In fact, even if you want to just get the silhouette down, you can even use just sort of like these globs that look like hands almost in order to signify, oh, that's a hand, or you know, that sort of thing. Just so that you can get the basic pose or the basic feeling, because there's a lot of emotion portrayed by what the hands look like, believe it or not. Because like if you have like especially in silhouettes, if the hands are like lanky or soft and chubby, it really makes a difference as to what the function of the character is. I think I might go with this my tradition of like really basic leg or feet. I mean, just because feet, especially when it comes to robotic or alien characters, just get to be nightmarish to look right, and it's all because we don't really look at feet as much. Like shoes and stuff are really easy to do, but if you get a foot, toes, it's basically like doing a more complicated hand, in my opinion, just because it looks so weird. Yeah, you have to get it just right, and it's not something that a lot of people have actively like looked at and studied as much as hands, at least in my case. I don't know, maybe not sure where I want to go with these legs. Might block in some basic recognizable muscles. Like if you have a few key structures within the leg, it's going to be much more identifiable to the audience or whoever's looking at the artwork. Like with the thighs and the forearms, one thing that I like to include a lot is some sort of crossing like shape down the like vertically, a shape like that, just to represent the there's this one muscle or tendon that comes down over this leg that's really defined if it's really muscular. And with the arm, you have the twisting of the two bones in the forearm, which makes that interesting shape that goes along the length of the arm. If I had some examples I'd show you, but my best advice is just look at like an anatomy book for a few hours just to get down what looks like what and things like that. I don't know the upper arm muscles groups as much. I just know that there's sort of a muscle group in front, and then this sort of joint, the shoulder muscles, I'm not even sure what the names are, but joins into that. And then there's a sort of weird like trifecta of different muscles in this area. One brush that's nice for this sort of thing is the inflate. It sort of gives it a little more rounded, but you don't want to go too far with it or else it'll get all weird looking like that. And, you know, it's just whatever looks right for me at least. Let's see. And the shoulder blades right there. Now in this area right here, there's a muscle group that sort of does this, and then it goes up the back, and these are all whoa, what the devil? Okay, right here is sort of, I can't remember the name of it, but it reaches down into the back right here, and then it goes up into the neck right there, and it's really epic looking, very masculine, strong. So I'm going to put that in there. Considering that this guy is going to be using his neck a lot, it's going to be really built up back here. There might even be some vertebrae over there. And same with the front muscles, although these are going to be a little bit more saggy just because you don't extend those as much unless you're looking upward, whereas this guy's going to probably be looking downward or side to side, that sort of thing. Still haven't added in the head yet, it's just a blob for the neck. I'd recommend putting in the head if you're doing a finished model just because it looks more complete and you can get an idea of proportions from the head itself. I want to make this rib cage really angular. I might use the pinch brush just to define that sort of edge right there. There's another, this is one of the most, a little bit of an awkward area is right in here, especially with the variations of male and female because it like curves into that area right there. But most of the time you just want to have, you know, the chest area. You don't want to extend it too much or else it'll look feminine, of course, but it kind of slopes downward if you're a little bit more skinny, and usually it's builds up more along the bottom area than the top. Then to kind of signify where it ends, you have the clavicle area, and you'll notice that I'm using a lot of human anatomy in this just to get down, because it really is a perfect, you know, standard to go off of as far as muscles and robotics, because it works to, you know, move limbs and carry things. You could use, like, if you're gonna go for more of a less organic thing, usually you see within robotics and stuff you have like ball joints right there, and then you have just like a hinge and then like a twisting thing, but that's a different story. I won't go into it right now. I don't really work on, not sure if the rib cage goes, I don't know. I just like to keep the crotch area as basic as possible just to prevent anybody from like implying more than there really is there, especially for like robotic characters. Even though with like Japanese comics it's always like some weird object gets put there and you're like, what the crap is that? But like you'll see like the originator, I think of this sort of, well, similar to my style of robotics and mecha, is the one guy that did, I can't pronounce names, but Appleseed, if you've ever heard of it, which is really nice. Like that sort of kind of rounded style, and like it had a lot of detail in it. Has a lot of like huge, like massive guns. And I always liked how they had like the little arms sticking out from the abdomen, and then they had the huge arms which mimicked the smaller arms, because that's like the control mechanism, I guess. But I'm not sure how the like sensory stuff goes with that, because you'd be like struggling to keep a weapon in place and you wouldn't know if you'd pulled the trigger or not, and I don't know, just my take on it. But yeah, I won't do anything on this character because that'll just look weird, but definitely check out Appleseed, if not the comics, the movies, because they have a lot of awesome, really awesome robotics in it. They have like these massive mechanical suits, and like they'll fly around and have like tanks and stuff like that. Anyways, kind of wanted to make these upper legs a little bit more muscular looking, and then the lower legs have very mechanical feel. And this is just the concept mesh that I'm working on right now. If once I'm done with this, I would normally go in and like define all this stuff with separate pieces of geometry and have all the muscular stuff all sculpted in and detailed. Um, you notice like the hinge joint in the knee is really bad right now. That's because that's just the landmark for me to be like, oh, that's where I'm gonna put like a actual cylindrical piece that is geometrically correct for that area. I want to make these lower legs really creepy looking. I'll have to look at some reference later on just to get what I'm going for. Almost like a, I don't know, some kind of thing in Bioshock probably that looks like this, but because they always have like really weird limbs that have really spiky stuff, and some of the, whatever the second one, the really lanky Big Daddies that have like the jump every place, or jump around every place, I don't know. Now I'm using a different tool now called Clip Curve, which is really nice for getting really sharp stuff, but you notice that it's going to mess up if this line is pointing towards the other side of the mesh, because it's going to like try to calculate that and it's not going to work. So in order to combat that, you can either go this way or just do it straight down, whichever suits you. But you can turn off symmetry, do it on one side, and then mirror it over to the other. I think I want to move these up a little bit, just so that lower, at least lower leg length, like if it's longer than the thighs, it looks very springy, I guess. And to line up the arms correctly, usually they are in an arc with the crotch area, just like this level, just around that point. If it's lower, it's going to have a really long feeling. If it's higher, then it's going to feel like really midget type of thing. I don't know. Yeah, I might do like a paint over this or something instead of completing an entire mesh, which would take a couple weeks probably with this sort of complexity. Not sure what I want to do with this. I think the spine should be a little bit more curved. I find having the legs flare out at the end of this little joint here gives it a little bit more of a thick feeling, or armored type of feel. Sort of like old knights in Middle Ages. Their kind of armor had that sort of thing. At least some of them did. That's another thing, like, just by observing different things, you gain all these little details, and you can apply them anywhere within your model, and just, as long as they look correct and they look really cool, then you can just go with it. It's almost like a stiletto heel type of thing. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm too lazy to do feet, to be honest. It's just headache, and they just look weird, or yeah. You want to have a lot of interesting variation within the pose for the back and things, like just to make it look a little bit more dynamic. More dynamic the better, generally. It looks more unique, it looks more cool, you know, whatever. Uh, right here I'm trying to get a little bit more of a backwards leaning pose, I guess, just so that it looks like he's a little bit more hunched over. Make sure to like blend your mask using just by control clicking on the surface, and that'll give it a little bit more smooth, I don't know, deformation. Having a little bit of trouble with this area right there. It's a little bit more thick than it should be. Because normally you'd be like, it'd be really awkward if he were to raise his arms at all. Armpits are kind of funky to deal with, especially on robotic characters, because like usually that area is really covered up with a whole bunch of armor and junk. I want to keep that curved type of feel, but I think I might make it so that his head kind of pops upward, as opposed to this curve. It kind of goes like that. If I could just inflate his head out right here, like that, even though that looks kind of stupid. Usually that only happens whenever you don't have, whenever anything looks really, dang it, really bulbous, it just kind of looks stupid. Sort of like the PS3 Move remote. I've always hated that thing because it just looks ridiculous with the weird bulb thing on the front and like stuff. I think I want to make his head a little bit smaller, actually. That's the cool thing about this, is that you can just sort of mess around with shapes and not have to even worry about stinking geometry. It just kind of, you can fix it later. You don't have to concern yourself, and that's what's great about ZBrush, is you can just be creative all that you want and not have any repercussions. And like, it used to be that you had to have an insanely detailed concept and then go into it with a regular modeling program and just do everything repetitively, technically, and not even concentrate on the creative part of it. Everything is planned out beforehand, but with ZBrush you just kind of dive in and do whatever you want. It's fun. This is sort of, I don't know, inspired by that one tutorial. The dude that did the 3D printing tutorial on ZBrush Classroom, can't remember it. He had the flat head thing. It's kind of interesting. Might do a takeoff on that, only a little bit more sharp and mechanical looking. Actually, clip curve. Chop off some of this. That's another cool thing. You just do that and not even have to worry about geometry. It's just amazing. I feel like this muscle in the front should be a little bit smaller. I'm going to use an inflate brush and just do that. Another nice thing that you can use for this sort of thing to make it look a little bit more mechanical is use H polish and just kind of work with it. It's a really natural feeling type of brush. Gives you a lot of really nice hard surface details. Okay, this video is getting kind of long. I'm not sure if I'm going to call it right here and just be like, hey, this is how you use Dynamesh, or if you guys want me to finish this and you're not completely bored with watching this video, then just say so in the comments, I guess. This needs to be more curved. Sort of like the aliens on Star Wars Episode 2, even though I hate the prequels, but they had some really good artwork in that. Just horrible acting. Should pose these arms differently. This is where the awkwardness of the rotation transpose tool kind of comes in. You know, it's so dang hard to get axis rotation down. Besides hinge is alright, but trying to do this sort of thing is just kind of awkward. Another thing you want to do is get the hotkeys down, so Q, W, E, and R are switching between different tools up there. And then in order to select brushes, just hit B and then all this stuff. So, I don't know. I think I might call this just done for now because this tutorial is getting way too long, but if you guys want to see me do more with this, just say so. Because I think it looks kind of cool, but, you know, whatever. That's it for now. If you have any questions, just ask me in the comments or message me, whatever you want to do. So, there you go. Thanks.